3 days ago, Adrian Moretti told everyone I would come back. By sunrise, there was nothing left in my room that proved I had ever belonged there. I didn't hear him say it. Not then. I learned about it later from Mrs. Alvarez, the housekeeper who had folded my sweaters for almost a year and pretended not to notice when I cried in the laundry room. "She'll come back," Adrian had said. Not angrily. That would have been easier. He said it the way men like Adrian said the sun would rise. Calm. Certain. Almost bored by the possibility that the universe might disagree with them. At 6:12 that morning he opened the door to my room. The curtains were still half drawn. Gray Manhattan light spilled across the hardwood floor in narrow stripes. The radiator clicked softly beneath the window. Somewhere downstairs a coffee machine hissed to life. Everything looked normal for exactly 3 seconds. Then he saw the closet. Empty. The white hanger stood in a perfect row, swaying slightly beneath the vent. My shoes were gone. The blue suitcase he hated because one will squeaked was gone. The framed photograph of my mother and me at Coney Island was gone. Even the cheap ceramic mug I kept beside the bed had disappeared. I had left one thing. The ring. It rested in the center of his pillow. Not mine. His. A thin platinum band with a small diamond that probably cost more than my first car. Adrian had given it to me 6 months earlier without asking whether I wanted it. "This makes things clear," he had said. Clear. That was one of his favorite words. Protection was another. He had a beautiful vocabulary for taking choices away. According to Mrs. Alvarez, Adrian stood in the doorway for almost a full minute without moving. That was unusual. Adrian Moretti was always moving. People moved when he entered rooms. Doors opened before he reached them. Cars appeared before he asked. Reservations materialized in restaurants that had supposedly been full for weeks. The city bent around him. But that morning my empty room did not. "Where is Claire?" His voice was quiet. Mrs. Alvarez looked down at her hands. "I don't know, Mr. Moretti. When did she leave?" "I don't know." That answer stopped him. Not because he believed her. Because nobody in that house ever told Adrian Moretti they didn't know something twice. He walked to the dresser. Nothing. Opened the top drawer. Nothing. Bathroom cabinet. Empty. Then he saw the key. I had placed it beneath the ring. The brass key to the front door of his townhouse. For 11 months I had carried it beside the key to the community clinic where I worked. One opened a building Adrian owned. The other opened the only place in my life that still felt like mine. He picked it up between 2 fingers. Mrs. Alvarez told me later that his face changed then. Barely. A tightening near his jaw. A pause in his breathing. The kind of reaction most people would never notice. But people who lived around powerful men learned to notice silence. His phone was already in his hand. "Call Daniel." His security chief answered immediately. "Find her." 2 words. That was all. Because Adrian still believed this was a problem his world knew how to solve. Find the car. Find the phone. Find the credit card. Find the woman. Bring everything back where it belonged. Except my car was parked at the clinic. My phone was turned off. My bank account hadn't been touched. And by noon, every camera Adrian controlled had given him the same answer. Nothing. For the first time since I had met him, Adrian Moretti had no idea where I was. And the truth was worse than anything he imagined. I hadn't disappeared because someone took me. I disappeared because I finally understood something Adrian never had. A locked door doesn't need a key when the person inside decides to walk away. I left at 4:37 in the morning. The city was still dark enough to hide me. Manhattan looked almost gentle at that hour. Delivery trucks idled at curbs. Steam drifted from subway grates. A man in a Yankees cap unlocked a bakery 2 blocks from Adrian's townhouse, while I stood across the street with 1 suitcase and $12 in cash folded inside my coat pocket. For 11 months that front door had opened for me before I touched it. That morning I closed it myself. I didn't look back. Not because I was brave. Because I knew if I saw one light turn on upstairs, I might lose my nerve. Adrian had that effect on people. He never needed to shout. He could make a room obey him by becoming quieter than everyone else. The first time I mistook that silence for safety. The second time I called it strength. By the time I understood it was control, I had already started arranging my life around his permission. It happened slowly. That was the dangerous part. My old apartment lease expired, and Adrian said his townhouse had more security. My car needed repairs, and suddenly a black sedan appeared every morning. The clinic's landlord threatened to raise our rent, and 3 days later Adrian told me the problem was handled. Handled. Another one of his words. I should have asked how. Instead, I thanked him. Then came the night everything changed. I had been standing in his study, still wearing my blue clinic scrubs under a winter coat. Snow pressed softly against the windows, turning the city beyond the glass into a blur of white and gold. I'm going to Boston this weekend, I told him. Adrian looked up from his desk. No one word. I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. My college roommate is getting married. You're not going. I stared at him. Excuse me. There's a situation developing outside the city. I don't want you traveling. I took off my coat slowly. You don't want me traveling? That's what I said. No, Adrian. You told me I'm not going. He leaned back in his chair. To anyone else he probably looked calm. I knew better. I'm keeping you safe, Claire. You keep saying that like it ends every conversation. His expression hardened. It should. That was the moment. Not the first warning. Just the first one I finally heard. I remember looking around his study. Dark wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Paintings I never understood. A desk large enough to make everyone sitting across from him feel small. Suddenly, I realized I had become one of those people. I'm not one of your employees, I said. I know. I'm not one of your men. I know. And I'm not something you own. Silence. The clock on the wall ticked once. Twice. Then Adrian stood. You're upset. I almost smiled. Not because anything was funny. Because even then, he believed my anger was temporary. Something to survive until I became reasonable again. One day, I said, you're going to tell me to stay and I won't. His eyes stayed on mine. Cold. Certain. Where would you go? There it was. The question beneath everything. Not where did I want to go. Not what did I need. Where could I possibly go without him? I picked up my coat. Adrian didn't stop me. At the door I heard him speak. You'll calm down. I turned. He was already looking back at the papers on his desk. Like the conversation was finished. Like I was predictable. Like love had made me permanent. I walked upstairs that night and started packing. Not quickly. Carefully. Because leaving a powerful man wasn't about running faster. It was about making sure he never saw you preparing to move. By 9 o'clock that morning, Adrian had turned Manhattan into a map of unanswered questions. Daniel called every driver who had worked the night shift. Nothing. He checked parking garages, train stations, hotels, private terminals. Nothing. By noon, 3 men were sitting in Adrian's study with laptops open, tracing cameras from Midtown to the Hudson. Still nothing. I knew because Mrs. Alvarez told me later. He didn't raise his voice once, she said. That scared everyone more. Adrian stood near the windows while the city moved beneath him. Yellow cabs. Buses. Thousands of people crossing streets without asking his permission. His phone rang every few minutes. No activity on her cards. No airline reservation. No rideshare account. No hotel check-in. Each answer made the room quieter. Daniel finally said. Maybe she had help. Adrian turned. From who? Nobody answered. That was the problem. I didn't have powerful friends. My mother had been gone for years. My father lived in Arizona and thought I still rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens. My closest friend from college had moved to Vermont. There was no secret boyfriend. No rich relative. No rival family waiting to hide me. I was just Claire Bennett, a woman who worked at a community rehabilitation clinic and forgot to replace the batteries in her smoke detector until it started chirping at 2 a.m. Adrian had spent 11 months learning everything about me, except how much I was willing to give up to leave. At 1:18 p.m., Daniel brought him my phone. They had found it inside my clinic locker. Turned off. Fully charged. Adrian stared at it for a long time. Then he asked, her car? Still in the employee lot. Apartment. She gave up the lease months ago. Adrian's jaw tightened. He already knew that. He had encouraged it. Why pay rent when you have a home here? That was what he had said. At the time it sounded practical. Now it meant I had left without a car, without a phone, without an apartment, and without touching money he could trace. For the first time, Adrian understood this wasn't impulsive. I had planned it. Quietly. While eating breakfast across from him. While sitting beside him in the back of his car. While smiling at Mrs. Alvarez over coffee. I had been disappearing in inches long before I walked out the door. At 2:40 p.m. Adrian went to the clinic himself. That part surprised me. He rarely entered my world unless he was fixing something. The clinic smelled like antiseptic, old carpet and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Parents sat in plastic chairs while children colored at a small table near reception. Nothing about the place belonged to Adrian. At least that was what I had believed. My coworker Rachel met him near the front desk. "You're looking for Claire." It wasn't a question. "Yes. She isn't here." "I can see that." Rachel folded her arms. "You always could see everything, couldn't you?" Daniel shifted beside him. Adrian didn't. "What does that mean?" Rachel looked directly at him. She loved this place because it was hers. A pause. Was. Rachel's face changed. That one word had landed. She opened a drawer and placed an envelope on the counter. Inside were documents. The clinic lease. Transfer records. Corporate filings. Adrian read the first page. Then the second. His expression went still. 6 months earlier, an investment company had purchased the building. A company buried beneath 3 others. All connected to him. I had found out 2 weeks before I left. Adrian looked at Rachel. She knew. Rachel nodded. And that's when she stopped believing this place was hers. For the first time that day, Adrian didn't ask where I had gone. He asked something else. When did she find out? 2 weeks ago. Rachel's answer was quiet. Adrian looked back at the documents. 2 weeks. That meant I had known while sitting across from him at dinner. Known while he asked about my day. Known while he told me the clinic was finally safe from rent increases. I remembered that night. He had poured sparkling water into my glass because I had an early shift the next morning. "You look tired," he said. "I'm fine. You always say that." I almost laughed. Because by then I had started noticing how often he answered questions I had never asked. He solved problems before I could decide whether I wanted them solved. The clinic had been the clearest example. 6 months earlier, our landlord called an emergency meeting. Rent was going up. Not a little. Enough that Rachel cried in the supply closet afterward. Enough that I spent 3 nights calculating budgets at my kitchen table, trying to decide which programs we could cut without hurting the families who depended on us. Then everything changed. The landlord suddenly became cooperative. The increase disappeared. Our lease was extended. No explanation. I should have known. But when I asked Adrian, he only said, "Maybe somebody finally made a reasonable decision." I believed him. That was what hurt most. Not the money. Not the building. The lie hidden inside something generous. 2 weeks before I left, I found the truth by accident. A maintenance invoice had been mailed to the clinic with the wrong corporate header. Northbridge Holdings. I recognized the name because I had seen it once on paperwork in Adrian's study. I told myself it meant nothing. Then I searched. One company led to another. Then another. By midnight, I was sitting alone beneath the clinic's fluorescent lights, staring at a chain of ownership that ended exactly where I feared it would. "Adrian." I called him. He answered on the first ring. "Claire. Did you buy my building?" Silence. Just half a second. But half a second was enough. "Where are you?" "Answer me. We can discuss this at home." "Home." The word made something inside me collapse. "Did you buy it?" "Yes." I closed my eyes. The vending machine hummed across the hall. Rain tapped the windows. A child's paper drawing was still taped beside my desk. A crooked yellow sun above a green house. Why? The owner was unstable. You needed security. I needed a lease. You needed certainty. I needed you to ask me. Another silence. Then his voice changed. Softer. Like softness could make the decision smaller. "You would have said no." I stared at the papers spread across the desk. That should have mattered. Claire. No. That should have mattered. He exhaled slowly. I protected the clinic. You bought the ground under my feet. It's still your clinic. Is it? That stopped him. Because we both knew the answer. Legally, maybe nothing had changed. Emotionally, everything had. From that night on, I started seeing all the invisible strings. The driver who appeared when my car broke down. The landlord who suddenly stopped calling. The specialist who found an opening for my father in Arizona. Problems kept disappearing around me. And every disappearance had Adrian's fingerprints on it. He thought love meant removing every obstacle from my path. He never understood that sometimes, choosing the path was the only thing that made it mine. Back at the clinic, Rachel watched him fold the documents carefully. She didn't leave because you failed to protect her, she said. Adrian lifted his eyes. Rachel didn't flinch. She left because you protected her from having a life you couldn't control. For once, Adrian Moretti had no answer. And somewhere far from Manhattan, I was learning how strange freedom felt when nobody knew where to find me. Freedom did not feel dramatic. It felt cold. It felt like a bus station outside Albany at 6:15 in the morning, bad coffee in a paper cup, and a vending machine humming beside a row of plastic seats. I had imagined leaving Adrian would feel like stepping into sunlight. Instead, I felt exposed. No driver waiting at the curb. No security camera I recognized. No one calling to ask whether I had arrived safely. For the first time in almost a year, nobody knew exactly where I was. I should have felt relieved. Mostly I felt tired. The woman beside me was asleep with her head against the window. Her name was Emily Carter. 24 years old. Elementary school aide. Owner of one red duffel bag, $200 in cash, and a habit of checking every reflection behind us. I had met her 3 weeks earlier at the clinic. She came in with a little boy named Noah who needed help after a long hospital stay. Emily wasn't his mother. She was his older sister. She filled out every form carefully and apologized whenever she asked a question. I recognized that kind of apology. The kind women learned when someone had convinced them their needs were inconveniences. After Noah's third appointment, Emily stayed behind. Can I ask you something? Her voice barely rose above the air conditioner. Of course. She looked toward the waiting room. If someone needed to leave New York without being found right away, how would they do it? My chest tightened. I should have told her to contact an attorney, a shelter, the police. Instead I asked, who are you afraid of? She stared at her hands. My stepfather. That was all she gave me. It was enough. Over the next week, I helped her contact a non-profit outside the city. Nothing secret. Nothing illegal. Just paperwork, temporary housing, new phone numbers, and people trained to help women start over safely. Then Emily made one mistake. She told someone at work she was leaving. By the next afternoon, a black sedan sat across from the clinic for 2 hours. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. I had spent too long with Adrian to believe coincidence without checking. That night I made my decision. If Emily left alone, she would panic. If I stayed in Manhattan, Adrian would find me before I could help her disappear cleanly. So we left together. 2 women. 2 bags. Cash tickets bought at the counter. No phones. No digital trail. The irony wasn't lost on me. Adrian had spent months teaching me how powerful men found people. I was using everything I had learned to help someone not be found. Emily woke when the bus brakes hissed. Are we there? Almost. She looked at me, eyes swollen from too little sleep. Why are you doing this? I watched bare winter trees move past the window. Because I understood fear? Because I needed one choice Adrian hadn't touched? Because helping her felt like proof I still belonged to myself? I know what it's like, I said. When someone thinks protecting you gives them the right to decide your life. Emily studied me. Was he dangerous? I thought of Adrian. His quiet voice. His tailored coats. The way an entire restaurant shifted when he walked inside. Then I thought of the clinic. The building he bought because he believed fear justified control. He could be, I said. But that wasn't why I left. When we reached the small town near the Vermont line, a woman from the nonprofit was waiting outside a diner. Emily hugged me before she got into her car. I hadn't expected that. Neither had she. Where will you go now? She asked. I looked down the empty road. I don't know. For the first time, those words didn't scare me. Back in Manhattan, Adrian was discovering the same thing. The security team had finally traced a camera from the Albany terminal. Daniel paused the footage. There I was. And beside me stood Emily Carter. Adrian stared at the screen. Who is she? Daniel handed him a file. 5 minutes later, Adrian understood. I had not vanished to punish him. I had vanished because someone else needed the one thing he had never learned how to give. A way out. Adrian watched the frozen image of me on Daniel's screen for nearly a minute. I was wearing the same gray coat I had left Manhattan in. Emily stood beside me, clutching her red duffel bag. Neither of us looked back at the camera. Where was this taken? Adrian asked. Albany bus terminal. And after that? Daniel hesitated. We found another camera 38 miles north. Then nothing. Adrian's eyes stayed on the screen. Nothing. She knew what to avoid. That answer landed harder than Daniel intended. Because Adrian knew exactly where I had learned. From him. From the way his drivers changed routes. From the way Daniel checked reflections in store windows. From the way Adrian once explained casually over dinner that people made themselves easy to find because they repeated habits. Same coffee shop. Same gas station. Same phone. Same fear. I had listened. He just never imagined I would use those lessons against his reach. Find the woman, Adrian said. Daniel glanced at the file. Emily. Find out whether she's safe. Not find Claire. Emily. Daniel noticed the difference. So did Adrian. By evening they knew enough. Emily had reached temporary housing through a non-profit near the Vermont border. She and her younger brother were safe. No one was asking Adrian for help. No one needed his money. No one needed his men. The problem had already been solved. By me. That should have been the end of it. Instead, Daniel found a motel receipt. Cash payment. 1 room. A small place outside a town with fewer than 4,000 people. Adrian left Manhattan before sunset. No convoy. Just Daniel driving. The city faded behind them. Glass towers became highways. Highways became dark stretches of road bordered by bare trees and patches of old snow. Adrian said almost nothing. 2 hours later, they parked across from the motel. 12 rooms. Blue doors. A flickering vacancy sign. A diner next door with 3 cars outside. Nothing about the place belonged in Adrian's world. Then I stepped out of room 8. He saw me through the windshield. I carried a paper cup in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. No makeup. Hair tied back. Cheap sneakers. Ordinary. Alive. For the first time in days, Adrian's shoulders loosened. Daniel reached for the door handle. Adrian stopped him. Wait. I crossed the parking lot toward the ice machine. A woman from room 6 waved. I waved back. That tiny gesture seemed to confuse him. Maybe because I didn't look like someone waiting to be rescued. I looked tired, but calm. Daniel watched Adrian carefully. You want me to bring her over? Adrian's eyes never left me. No, Daniel thought he had misheard. You came all this way. I know. She's right there. I can see that. I disappeared back into my room. The blue door clicked shut. Daniel waited. So what now? Adrian looked down at his hands. Hands that had signed leases without asking me. Moved money without telling me. Changed my life with signatures I never saw. He could have crossed that parking lot. Could have knocked. Could have told himself he only wanted to explain. Could have turned another choice into something that belonged to him. Instead, he stayed in the car. She left because I never gave her room to choose. Daniel said nothing. Adrian stared at the motel door. If I walk over there now, what am I proving? It may have been the first real question he had asked about me in months. Not where I was. Not when I was coming back. What his presence would cost me. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The light in my room came on behind the curtains. Adrian finally leaned back. Drive. Daniel turned toward him. Home. Adrian looked once more at room 8. Not yet. The car pulled away quietly. I never saw it. But the next morning when I opened my motel door and found nobody waiting outside, something in me shifted. Because Adrian had found me. And for the first time he had chosen not to take the next step for me. The first clue was the motel manager. He caught me near the vending machine the next morning, while I was trying to convince myself powdered creamer counted as breakfast. "You had visitors last night." My hand stopped over the coffee lid. "What visitors?" "Two men in a black sedan." The hallway suddenly felt colder. I looked through the glass door toward the parking lot. Empty. What did they want? The manager shrugged. Nothing, apparently. Sat there a while. Then left. I already knew. Adrian. There was no reason to pretend otherwise. I carried my coffee back to room 8 and locked the door. For several minutes I stood there with my back against it, waiting. For anger. For fear. For the familiar sensation of someone else making the next decision for me. It never came. Instead, I pictured him sitting across that parking lot. Close enough to walk 20 yards and knock. Close enough to send Daniel. Close enough to turn my escape into another argument he intended to win. But he hadn't. That frightened me differently. Because control was easy to understand. Change wasn't. I stayed at the motel another 4 days. No calls. No flowers. No messages delivered through Rachel. Nothing. Emily and Noah moved into longer-term housing with help from the nonprofit. I visited them once before leaving town. Noah showed me his new bedroom. Blue comforter. A small desk. Glow-in-the-dark stars already stuck crookedly across the ceiling. "It's ours," Emily said. She emphasized that word. Ours. I understood exactly why. On the bus back toward New York, I watched the highway unwind beneath a pale winter sky. I wasn't going home. Not yet. I had rented a small apartment in White Plains under my own name. 1 bedroom. 3rd floor. A kitchen barely large enough for 2 people. I loved it immediately. The first night, I slept on an air mattress because my furniture hadn't arrived. It was the best sleep I'd had in months. Then Rachel called. "I need to tell you something." I sat up. "What happened?" "The building." My stomach tightened. "What about it?" "Northbridge transferred ownership." I went quiet. "To who?" "You." I thought I had misheard. "What?" "The clinic property. It's being transferred into an independent nonprofit trust. You and the board control it." My fingers tightened around the phone. "Adrian did that?" "Yes." "Did he attach conditions?" That was my first question. "And?" "None." I stood and walked toward the window. Below me, someone was scraping ice from a Honda. A dog barked across the street. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. "He can reverse it," I said. "Apparently he can't." That sounded intentional. Almost painfully intentional. Rachel hesitated. "There's more." I closed my eyes. "Of course there is. He fired the driver assigned to monitor your commute." My eyes opened. I didn't know there was one. I figured. A bitter laugh escaped me. Some habits died slower than others. "And Daniel came by yesterday," Rachel continued. "Why?" "To remove the private security cameras Adrian had installed outside the clinic." I sank onto the windowsill. "He installed cameras?" "Months ago." I stared at the floor. Part of me wanted to be furious. Another part already was. But beneath it was something harder to name. Adrian wasn't asking me to forgive what he had done. He was dismantling it. Quietly. Without making sure I watched. That afternoon, I took the train into Manhattan. I told myself it was for paperwork. Nothing else. Rachel hugged me when I walked into the clinic. Then she handed me an envelope. No corporate logo. No expensive stationery. Just my name in Adrian's handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Claire, you were right. Protection without permission is still control. The clinic is yours. Your life is yours. I won't ask where you're living. I won't send anyone to find out. If I ever see you again, it will be because you chose the room." I read it twice. Then a third time. For months, Adrian's power had made me feel small. Now somehow, his restraint made me feel something far more dangerous. Curious. I went back to the clinic the next morning. Not because of Adrian. That was what I told myself. There were insurance forms waiting, 2 staff schedules to fix, and a board meeting Rachel had postponed twice because nobody wanted to make decisions while ownership was changing. Normal problems. I wanted normal problems. At 10:17, I was standing beside the copy machine when Rachel appeared in the doorway. He's here. My hand froze over a stack of intake forms. Who? She gave me a look. Right. Of course. For 1 second, every old instinct came back. The black sedan. Daniel near the entrance. Adrian walking in like the building had been expecting him. I stepped into the hallway. None of that was there. Adrian stood alone near reception. Dark overcoat. No entourage. No phone in his hand. No one opening doors for him. He looked strangely out of place beneath fluorescent lights beside a bulletin board covered in children's drawings. Then he saw me. Everything in his face went still. So did I. For weeks I had imagined this moment. In some versions I yelled. In others I walked away. In one particularly satisfying version, I made him wait 3 hours in a plastic chair. Instead I said, "Why are you here?" His eyes stayed on mine. "You have papers to sign." That almost made me laugh. Rachel has papers. I know. Then why are you here? A pause. Because I needed to give you something personally. He reached inside his coat. My body tensed before I could stop it. Adrian noticed. His hand stopped. The hurt on his face was small, but real. Slowly he pulled out a folder. Blue. Cheap. The kind sold in office supply stores. He placed it on the reception counter and stepped back. You can open it after I leave. That sentence did something to me. Not the folder. The distance. Picked it up. Inside were ownership documents for the clinic trust. My name. Rachel's name. 3 community board members. Adrian's name appeared nowhere except on the transfer authorization. There was also a letter from the law firm confirming he had no authority to reclaim the property. I read it twice, then looked up. You really gave it away. It was never mine to keep. That didn't stop you before. No, he didn't defend himself. I wasn't prepared for that. I closed the folder. What do you want? His expression shifted. Nothing. Adrian. I mean it. You crossed half the city to hand me paperwork you could have mailed. Yes. So you want something. He looked toward the waiting room. A little girl was stacking wooden blocks beside her mother. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I wanted to see the place the way you see it. That stopped me. He continued. I came here before and saw a building that could be purchased. His eyes returned to mine. You saw people who needed it to remain theirs. The copy machine clicked behind me. Somewhere down the hall, Rachel laughed with a patient. The clinic kept moving around us. Adrian didn't control any of it. Maybe that was why I could finally breathe. You found me at the motel, I said. Yes. How? Daniel found the camera trail. And you left. Yes. Why? His jaw tightened slightly. Because I finally understood that finding you did not mean I had the right to approach you. I looked at him for a long time. The old Adrian would have called that weakness. The man standing in front of me looked like it had cost him more than money ever had. I'm living in White Plains, I said. His eyes changed. Surprise. Then caution. He hadn't asked. That mattered. I have an apartment, I continued. Mine. A faint smile touched his face. I'm glad. You're not going to ask for the address? No. Not even secretly? No, I believed him. That scared me more than distrust. Adrian stepped toward the door. His hand touched the handle. Goodbye, Claire. I heard myself speak before I had decided to. Coffee. He turned. I swallowed. 1 cup. He didn't smile this time. He just nodded. Your choice. And for the first time it was. The coffee shop was 4 blocks from the clinic. Not Adrian's kind of place. No reservations. No private room. No waiter who knew his name. Just scratched wooden tables, mismatched mugs, and a chalkboard menu with 3 kinds of soup. I chose it on purpose. Adrian knew that. He still came. When I arrived, he was already sitting near the window. Alone. No Daniel. No black sedan idling outside. Just Adrian Moretti holding a paper cup like an ordinary man waiting for someone who might not show. That image stayed with me. I sat across from him. You're early. So are you. I almost didn't come. I know. I frowned. How? Because I would have. That surprised me. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Outside, taxis moved through wet streets. Someone laughed near the counter. A blender screamed behind the barista. Life kept happening. Adrian looked at me. Not through me. Not around me. At me. I'm sorry, he said. I had imagined hearing those words. Somehow they sounded smaller in real life. Not weaker. Just human. For what? I asked. He understood the question. For deciding what was best for you without asking. I waited. For buying the clinic. Another pause. For having people watch you when you never agreed to it. His hand tightened around the cup. For confusing fear with care. That one hurt. Because it was true. I looked out the window. Do you know what the worst part was? No. I stopped trusting good things. His expression changed. When the rent problem disappeared, I wondered who you called. I swallowed. When my father got that specialist, I wondered whether you paid someone. Claire. When someone was kind to me, I started asking myself if you arranged it. He went silent. I turned back to him. You made the world easier. My voice shook. And somehow, you made it harder to believe any of it was mine. Adrian looked down. For once, he had nothing elegant to say. Good. I didn't need elegant. I needed true. I can't undo that, he said. No. But I can stop doing it. That's not the same as changing. I know. Another surprise. The old Adrian would have argued. This one let the sentence stay where I put it. We finished our coffee slowly. No promises. No dramatic declarations. When we walked outside, rain had started. Light. Cold. Adrian opened an umbrella. Then stopped. Do you want to share? Such a simple question. I almost laughed. Months ago, he would have simply pulled me under it. I stepped beside him. Yes. We walked 3 blocks without speaking. At the corner near the clinic, I stopped. This is where I go. He nodded. I know. I looked at him. If I come back into your life, Adrian, it won't be because you waited long enough. His face remained still. It won't be because you changed the clinic. I understand. It won't be because you found me. I understand. I took a breath. If I come back because I choose you. Something in his eyes broke open. Not victory. Relief. Maybe gratitude. He looked at me like I had handed him something more valuable than loyalty. Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you always have a choice. The rain tapped softly against the umbrella. I believed he meant it. That didn't mean everything was fixed. It meant something better. We could begin honestly. I turned toward the clinic. After 2 steps, I looked back. Adrian was still standing there. He didn't follow. He didn't call my name. He simply waited. And that was how I knew the man who once ruled everything around him had finally learned the one thing power could never purchase. Love only stays when the door remains open.